This ancient monster appeared and woke up from its sleep for thousands of years. The monster destroyed the city below it, and the only way was to make the monster sleep again forever. In a small town surrounded by quite high mountains called Mount Lincoln, the mountain contains many animals and plants that thrive. But it turns out that behind it there is a creature that has been asleep for quite a long time. One day there were two researchers who were studying strange activities on the mountain. They were reading that there was an unusual movement up there. Then several earthquakes appeared, followed by some poisonous gases that emerged from underground. The gas hit one of them to death, while the man tried to escape from there while carrying a black suitcase. Unfortunately, the man fell because of the earthquake and was hit by large rocks, leaving the suitcase falling on the edge of the cliff. On the other hand, there was a man named Thomas who was working with his team, but the earthquake hampered their activities. Even one of his friends named Joe was hit by a tree branch until it broke one of his legs. Seeing this condition, Thomas planned to take Joe to the hospital for help, but for some reason Joe seemed uncomfortable. As soon as Joe was lifted and put into the car, he died. What happened to him? How could a broken bone cause him to die? On the other hand, a woman named Emily and her friend were researching the same thing. She was an expert in reading mountain activity, although sometimes she made mistakes. Tomas coordinated with the sheriff there. The sheriff also felt something was wrong. It was unlikely that someone would die from a broken bone, and this was quite a strange incident. Thomas also thought so. Something must be wrong. Thomas had lived in that small town for a long time. He was even born there. Tomas had a father named William, who until now has been studying the figure of a creature believed to live in the mountain. Unfortunately, Thomas felt that it was just a myth. Even Thomas's sister Grace felt that her father was not in his right mind. For years he studied it, but to no avail. Tomas was more concerned with his father's condition, who was getting old and weak. He had to take his medicine regularly. Grace at that time wanted to go to the mountains with her lover, but was forbidden by Tomas. For him it was dangerous, especially since the condition of the mountain was not good, but Grace still insisted on going. Meanwhile, this man named Jack, he was ordered by the government to look for the black suitcase. Unfortunately, his journey was hampered because suddenly a crack appeared that created a barrier on the road. Besides being at home, William often went and hung out at a shop owned by Zoe. Tomas asked Zoe to accompany him. Meanwhile, Tomas met Emily outside at that time. It had been a long time since they last saw each other a few years ago, and it seemed like they had a relationship, but it didn't continue. William was still studying the figure of the creature on the mountain. He was still convinced that the earthquake that had occurred for several weeks was caused by the creature. Then in a location not far from the mountains, there was a man who lived there. That night he felt something was wrong around his house. Suddenly it was like something came out of the ground. The man was pulled and his house sank into the ground. The next morning, Emily tried to examine the movement of the ground on the mountain, but she saw several dead squirrels. The squirrels showed no signs of attack. Then Emily remembered that this must be caused by poison. Yes, carbon dioxide that comes from the ground due to active volcanic movements. This was also felt by the sheriff's dog. At that time, the sheriff and Tomas were where Joe was hit by a tree branch, and suddenly the sheriff's dog became weak. A few moments later, Emily came and warned them not to get too close to the ground because of the high carbon dioxide. Grace was getting ready to go hiking with her lover. She tried to be quiet so that her father wouldn't find out. But William found out. This time, William began to believe that there was a creature living on the mountain, an ancient creature they called Marduk. An ancient creature that eats humans, sleeping for thousands of years, and will rise to take revenge on humans. Grace was increasingly unsure of her father. Maybe her father was insane. Grace then left the house carrying climbing equipment. Grace went with her lover by car to get to the stop. Grace felt uncomfortable because of her lover's driving, which made her nauseous. But in the end, they continued the journey on foot. On the other hand, Tomas was approached by Jack, who asked for his help. Tomas was the person who knew the mountain best, so Jack asked Tomas for help to take him up the mountain, to look for something on government orders. At first, Tomas refused, but in the end, Tomas agreed. Emily was at that time at a mountain location again doing research, but a few moments later, the rocks in front of her collapsed, causing a large hole. Emily tried to get away from there because she felt something was wrong. Meanwhile, Tomas and Jack together found a research location, one of Jack's colleagues. Yes, they found a body and some suitcase detectors. Only Jack was still not honest with Tomas why they were there. Then, Emily came to tell them to leave the mountain immediately. There was unusual activity happening there, but Jack still wanted to go. In the end, Tomas gave Jack directions to the requested location, but Jack had to be careful because the location was very steep and close to a dangerous cliff. While William was increasingly convinced that night that the monster Marduk was on the mountain and was ready to wake up, Marduk was ready to take revenge on humans by eating them. Although the others were increasingly worried about the condition of the mountain, but not with Grace. That night was actually a happy night for her. Her lover proposed to her, but unfortunately Grace had not had time to answer because she saw something terrible. Grace saw a big eye on the rocks. What is that? Grace and her lover began to panic and wonder what they were seeing. Then the big eye suddenly released a kind of tentacle ready to hit Grace. Luckily, they survived and escaped from there. On the other hand, Emily asked the sheriff to evacuate the residents because this was already an emergency. At first, the sheriff was not sure, but when Tomas spoke, the sheriff finally considered Emily's words. The next morning, the sheriff gathered the residents and asked them to leave the city for a while because there was unusual mountain activity. William was also asked to go to his Aunt Tomas's house. William asked Tomas to bring his mother's heirloom bracelet. The necklace is believed to be able to ward off danger. Then William also said that Grace was on the mountain. Tomas would not let Grace there, and Emily would help her. Before leaving, William did not forget Zoe. He wanted to invite her to come with him. But suddenly the earthquake came again, causing the shop to sink into the ground. While looking for Grace, Tomas and Emily met Jack, who was in pain. It seemed like he fell due to the earthquake. Here Jack finally told the truth that he was looking for a black suitcase belonging to the government. The suitcase was very valuable, and not long after the earthquake came again and a large tentacle hit Jack until he was dying. Before he died, Jack told the location of the suitcase. Inside the suitcase was a weapon that could kill monsters. Each of them had problems. William tried to get out of the shop. Tomas tried to take the suitcase, while Grace and her lover were trapped in a whirlpool of sand under which a very large Marduk monster appeared. The monster's mouth was so big that it was almost a house. Grace was successfully saved by Tomas, but her lover did not survive. After getting the suitcase and Grace, now they had to go to the nearest climber's post. There they can find a helicopter. But their journey is not easy. The appearance of the Marduk monster makes the earthquake even more powerful. The Marduk monster is almost as big as a mountain, maybe even bigger than the mountain itself. While William and Zoe find a way out through the top, they have to struggle because the earthquake makes their efforts even more difficult. Tomas and the others managed to reach the climbing post and found a helicopter. Emily turned on the helicopter while Tomas prepared to finish off the Marduk monster using the weapon in the suitcase. It seems that the government has indeed prepared this. The weapon will lock the target, but what should Tomas aim at from the monster? Suddenly, Grace remembered her father's words that the Marduk monster's weakness was in its mouth and neck. Tomas locked the target, then released a missile that began to scatter. Some stuck in the neck and some went straight to the Marduk monster's mouth. Tomas managed to blow up the monster and fly using the helicopter. So did William and Zoe. They managed to get out of the shop. They all survived. Tomas and Emily also had a relationship.